screens, it's a plot to drop the IQ. Fighting amongst each other over rumors that don't like you. Prefer us trapped in melancholy with the wood ones of holly. Suggestions that obliterate to camouflage the folly. Attempted mental robbery, executed sloppily. The hypocrisy, this mockery, and walk the talk with me. Put the hands up to touch the Akasha, cause you know deep down there's something bigger than your wallet.
Sweet eternal balance of all that is good, true, and beautiful, friends. Welcome back to Rogue Ways, where today we get to talk about the sins of scientism. You know, the age-old divide between the spiritual, the philosophical, the theological, and the rational, so-called, the scientific, the materialist, the atheist. There's a big divide. It's been perhaps intentionally wedged in between to divide people, especially to create the illusion of one of the greatest logical fallacies of all time, which is the false dilemma, that you have to choose either or. To which Peter of Family Guy says, can it be both? And the answer is yes, it can be both. You can do both. You don't have to remain divided. They never, in fact, were divided. It was only that people chose a side and stuck to it. It was only that people looked down a narrow lens and found all the things that supported their side and ignored everything that didn't. But actually, the two things are two halves of one whole. And today we're going to repair a little bit more of that ideology and mindset. So let's do it. We'll jump to it. I'm just going to rhyme for the rest of the episode. Just kidding. I'm not. But here we go. Nope. Here we go. This is rogueways.org, where you can find me and everything I do. You can book soul services, which include tarot readings, past life readings, sound healing, and more. You can also check out the dream walking class I teach. It's one of the many classes I teach. It's the one I'm happiest about right now and happiest to keep doing. Out of all the things I've taught, it results in the most instantaneous upliftment of the people who take it. So I like it for that reason. It is like handing yourself a spiritual skill set, having started even from nothing. And that is fantastic. Everybody can access their dreams and use them in order to know anything that they want to know, understand more about anything they want to understand, manifest, and more. I'm not teaching another class until October unless a huge pile of people just shows up and is very interested, and then maybe we'll fit one in before then. But October is likely to be the next one. But that's here on rogueways.org. You can also read the testimony of people who have worked with me. You can get my books. There are many of them. You can get them directly from me here with a channeled source message on the inscription for you, or you can get them from Audible, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, other booksellers. There's the fictional trilogy, Sine Curve of Aeons, about humanity's movement through golden and dark ages, including our time now on Earth. And there's a couple channeled message books as well, such as The Key of Transformational Healing and more. That's all here at rogueways.org as well. And in the shop, you can find some of the exceptionally powerful and beautiful orgone that I am guided to create for people. What's left of them here. You can also order a custom orgone lotus votive if you're into that, or a custom orgone pillar, the most powerful orgone I ever make, and the most powerful orgone I have ever encountered myself. This is all here at rogueways.org. So I hope you check out the site, support what you love, and find beautiful upliftment for yourself. And I also always want to invite you guys to rogueways.substack.com. That is where I do all of my published writing these days. I used to just have it on my site. Now it's here on Substack, where people can choose to reward me for all of the excellent content that I create. I'm a writer first, a teacher by profession, and then a podcaster, spiritual healer by guidance, by divine guidance. So check that all out at rogueways.substack.com. Channeled messages come through like cycles of wellness. No, actually, that's not channeled. I think the immutable truth and expression was the most recent channeled message. That channeling comes through from the spiritual ancestors who I have been in connection with since I was a teenager, at least at my earliest reckoning. And now their messages come through in writing. And so some of these are here on Substack for paid subscribers. For free subscribers, I have articles like The Cycle of Wellness and The Science of Transcendence, which is actually half of which is part of what we're talking about today. So that's the most recent post for anybody, free subscribers too. So if you're a free subscriber on Substack, rogueways.substack.com, you also get plenty, but my paid subscribers know where it's at as well. You can also go to rogue.locals.com and get all of this content by being a supporter there too. So that's Substack. I also really want to encourage anyone who is listening to this on podcast to go right now to your device and go to rumble.com/rogueways. I have so few followers there. Many thousands less than what I had on YouTube by the time they deleted me for the third time. Many thousands less than I have on Rockfin. Many thousands less than I have on podcast. But in case Rockfin is going somewhere, or in case it isn't something that lasts much longer, which is sort of what's being said by some people, and I don't know, nor do I really care, but I would love to stay in connection with you. So please go find me there, rumble.com/rogueways. It's the backup I have access to. I do have a YouTube again. It's something like YouTube. It's like Lindsay Sharman Rogueways, or I don't know. And I literally only have it there in case people who encounter me from other shows are looking for me only on YouTube. They can at least find something in which I explain why I'm not on YouTube. So I don't really care. And that's not going to have most of my content, because I'm not going to ever put anything there that will get me deleted again, so that I have at least, again, something on YouTube. But Rumble so far has never seemed to throttle me. They also seem to not tell anyone I exist. So I'm not maybe throttled, but I'm also don't seem to get many people here. So please go follow me there. I also, in case you are someone who knows me on Facebook, that account I've been denied access to it. It seems like there is literally no way for me to get back in, even though they promised me that they're just trying to protect me for my own protection. I cannot access my account now. So who knows if or when that will change. I may never be on Facebook again. So if that was somewhere you were used to interacting with me, find me on Instagram or Twitter. For now, Rumble, Twitter, and Instagram are the places that seem to be lasting and seem not to be, at least not deleting me. If not letting anyone see me. That shadow banning still might be occurring. But anyways, that's my rant about Rumble. I hope to see you there. I know a lot of people also have been complaining lately. I guess the Rockfin streams have gotten worse. Like there's some lagging and some endless cycles of doom that just never refresh. So Rumble doesn't seem to have those problems either. So there's another reason to go there. I know a lot of people hate Rumble because it is perhaps controlled opposition. But man, what isn't? So yeah, check me out on Rumble, rumble.com/rogueways. All right. We'll get into it now. And I still, this is one of the things that if somebody is an atheist at heart, a materialist at heart, what was I call them? A mechanism, not like a mechanism, but like as a capital M mechanicity focused people. If somebody's into those sorts of pathways of life and of thinking, and that's their paradigm, it's almost impossible to convince them of anything else. So while I'm about to show you a bunch of evidence, and this is just a slight scratching of the surface of the evidence of things like non-locality, of things like psychokinesis, of things like telepathy, and more, no matter how much we document this over how many decades in exactly the way that the materialists want us to, no matter how much we do it, they still refuse to even consider it. If you take a hardcore materialist who believes that they're a logical person, even though they will act out their illogical ways of thinking over and over and over again, exactly in these ways, like by denying reality, you can show them this and they will just refuse to look at it. They will literally just push it out. They no. There has to be another explanation. One of the things that they fail to recognize often is that, yeah, there is an explanation. There's an explanation for all of this. No one's saying it's magic. I mean, we might call it that, but no one's actually saying it's just this completely non-understandable series of phenomenon. We're not even saying they're non-material. We're not even saying they're not, in some way, mechanistic. We're saying that there's something that so far we haven't explained and so far seems to defy that mechanistic materialist view of reality. And we have evidence for it. And they just refuse to look at it. And I've had these arguments so many times in my life because I am an exceptionally logical person, and therefore I'm also someone who then admits when there are things that exist that so far science hasn't explained. God, I hope I'm not muted. Oh, I'm not. um, and so that's my type of logic. I'm like, okay, well then, so what is it? What is it when every single human being I have ever met has had the experience of thinking someone suddenly and without reason, and then that person calls them? Every person I've ever met has that experience. And we do not seem to have the opposite experience where we just suddenly think of someone and they're just really strongly in our minds and then they don't call or connect with us. Like that doesn't happen, right? They can experience these things too and still not be curious about them. Whereas I'm like, no, I see this is actually what logic is to look at something like that and wonder, why does it happen? What is it? Not to ignore it. It's okay to look at it and say, I don't know, and have it exist in a large pile of ideas and things that you hold on to and say, these are the things I don't know about. That's okay too. And we can get into the whole Dunning-Kruger thing with this because what it really comes down to is that people think they're smarter when they deny the things they don't understand. And no, you're not smarter. Sorry, you're stupider. You're literally ignorant. That is the definition of ignorance. You are ignoring the thing you don't understand. You're refusing to admit that you are not informed on this subject. That's not smart. That makes you dumb. So people who are in this camp, they're often the most faith-based people you meet. As in, again, you can present them with any type of argument, any type of study, any type of evidence, and they will literally just ignore it because it doesn't fit their belief system. These are the scientism people. These are the mechanistic, obsessed people. These are people who imagine that they're rational. And they're not. Very, very much so they're not. And again, like Dunning-Kruger, they will think you are the stupid one if you simply acknowledge how much humans don't understand about the universe and then ask questions about it. Questions you probably can't answer yet, but you're curious about. That's actually the root of all scientific thinking right there, is to look at what we don't know yet and wonder about it. That's the beginning. That's the seed. Then you go about gathering information and data as much as you can and forming hypotheses. And no, believe it or not, you don't have to then test your hypotheses. You can just keep going and keep wondering. That's okay. But the hardcore scientism followers, they do not understand that process. It terrifies them seemingly. And it's funny that I don't remember who it is who does this comedic skit, but part of their skit is like, you know, screw these atheists. Like they know they have a soul. They just like think they're so much better than everyone else because they pretend they don't. And I'm like, I really sometimes wonder, like, do you really believe that this is all, every single thing you've ever seen and touched is a purely just accidental, these atoms came together in this way at this point in the universe's expansion? And it's just a pure accident. It's just a mechanistic wonder of like, whoa, yeah, look, eyeballs exist. Is that really what you think? You literally think you have this much conscious presence and then your body dies and so the consciousness just evaporates and it's gone. It just dissolves back into the background from whence it came. I mean, in a way, that's kind of what happens in my understanding. But it's a bit different. You stay a bit more cohesive than that. right? And you're still you. You just don't have this body anymore or this name. So I don't know. I have a lot more evidence for the soul existing, for consciousness being a universal constant, and for therefore the soul perhaps being a form of highly organized consciousness expressing itself, than they have for that not existing. And for this being just a bag of bolts, skin suit that we're just happen to find ourselves within, and then we'll just disappear and nothing will exist ever again. That is us. But anyways, let's look at some of the things that point towards that which is what people would normally call spiritual, right? And again, the whole point here is that there is actually nothing that is just spiritual or just physical, just mechanistic or just consciousness based. There is no actual divide here. The divide is a false dilemma. It's a logical fallacy. There is no logic in this logical fallacy. It is just one thing. We just call it different things. I think intelligent people come to that understanding pretty quickly, actually, where they say, oh, psychology and shamanism and science, like they're all actually describing the same exact reality. They're just doing it from slightly different angles and with a different lexicon. And that's it. It's all the same stuff. And in fact, we are all coming to the same conclusions from all of these angles. And we're coming to the same results from all of the actions we undertake within our paradigm. Just have different words for it. And then if you're really highly intelligent, you see that and you go, oh, everybody's talking about the same thing. Everybody is talking about the exact same thing. And they're just using different words. And the more you can look at different disciplines and paradigms and look at the places where they cross over and look at all the different words and make them one word in your mind, the farther you're going to get. That is the unified field, actually. It's just realizing that we're all describing the exact same thing in different words, and we're all saying the same thing we do. There's nothing actually to fight about. There is no division. So we've been looking at this page this whole time I've been talking, and this is an unexplored domain of non-locality toward a scientific explanation of instrumental transcommunication. And non-locality is like a real fancy word that is just a science-y word that just means there is no location for this phenomenon. There is no point of origin that we can pinpoint. It is a dispersed, nebulous presence. It's an information field that can be tapped into from anywhere at any time. That's non-locality. I wrote an article, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, on the non-locality of consciousness, and it's very similar to this episode I'm doing right now, actually, and the piece that I just recently wrote. Although the piece I just wrote is all new, it's all new science, it's all new studies, but I'm repeating the same sort of idea again and again: is that consciousness is not local. It doesn't exist in your brain. You can't pinpoint a place in you where, oh, there's the consciousness. No, not even the pineal gland. Not even that. There is nowhere in your body where there is consciousness, just there. There is everywhere in your body where consciousness can be found. And if you want to call a part of consciousness, let's just say memory, then we have proven literally that every single part of your body contains memory. Which is why when you put a heart from someone who is recently deceased into a heart recipient, you take this heart donor's heart, you put it in a heart recipient's body, all of a sudden they have skills, they have abilities, they have memories, they have languages, they have feelings, they have eye color that changes because there's memory in the heart. There's memory in the spleen, there's memory in your pinky finger. There's no there's no locality to your memory or to your consciousness. There's nowhere that it exists that humans can locate. So we call this non-local when something is not specified to a specific location. It's not restricted to that. So when they're talking about non-locality, they're talking about information transference between people in this specific article and what they're talking about with non-locality. So here's the abstract: instrumental transcommunication, which is, they define communication with deceased persons through an instrument such as a radio, right? So now we're talking about consciousness still existing after death, the non-locality again, like where are they after death? Oh, they're anywhere. You can be anywhere in the world and talk to them. It's just like non-local consciousness. So they're communicating through a radio, and it says is a repeatedly observed phenomenon that has lately been experimentally tested. And so here they explore that, and they look for how or why or what might be the mechanism. And they use theories of non-locality, in particular the vacuum field theory, which is something that has become more and more popular with the unified field people such as Nassim Haramein and more, who are looking at the 0 point vacuum field liminal place between the non-vacuum and the vacuum, or the black hole and the non-black hole, in which all information seems to be stored, making the universe hollow fractal. Sorry if that's like way beyond your understanding of what I just said, but it exists. And so they're using that in this study to explain how you can communicate with people who are dead. This is a scientific study. Okay, and yes, you plop this in the hands of a bunch of, this is from 2008, by the way. You plop this in the hands of a bunch of people who are hardcore materialists, and they won't even look at it. They will refuse to even entertain the possibility, let alone the evidence, let alone the possible explanation of the mechanism. Because they're stupid. No offense. Like, this is the definition of lacking in intelligence. As Einstein said, condemnation without investigation is the height of ignorance. You're choosing actually to be stupid. You don't have to be stupid. You can get smarter anytime you want by just asking questions about anything. To ask the question is to engage in the content, to wonder, and to be open to a possible explanation which you didn't previously have access to. And you're investigating now. And now you might find, and this is why I think most people won't engage in these types of theories or studies or published piles and piles and piles of evidence, is because they're worried they'd have to change their mind. And I'm not going to lie, I used to be an atheist. I used to be a materialist. I tried really hard as a communist. You cannot be anything but. I'm not saying my specific group. I'm saying this is a tenet of communism, that you are a materialist atheist or else you are a capitalist roader, that there's no in between. So I tried really hard to be this materialist atheist person, but I could never deny my own spiritual experiences and my own understanding of my soul. And I would have to make myself stupid in order to do so. But there's also like an elitism in this. There's the presumption, again, a la Dunning-Kruger, that you are smarter than other people and better than them. And here's the argument, is that you're strong enough and smart enough that you don't need to explain things away by magic. You don't need to comfort yourself by believing in something that exists out there beyond you. Oh, I don't need that. That is all that has happened to me in life, before life, in previous lives, and in this life, fully unexplainable by science. I don't need it. It just is true. And here I am being intelligent and logical and looking for the actual explanation for those things. But these people don't understand that. They only understand the elitism, the ego-filled, right? The dismissal without investigating the ignorance. So it's just one of many studies. This is just about talking to dead people. Here's another one, testing non-local observation as a source of intuitive knowledge. And this one is so fascinating. This one is 2008 also. And in this one, they put lasers in double steel-walled shielded chambers, light tight. Not a single photon could escape these chambers. They tested that before and after every single study, every single test subject's experience, that no photons were escaping and no photons ever escaped. And they tested whether or not people could sense whether or not the laser was on or not. And it turns out beyond probability, far, far, far exceeding probability, people could tell whether the laser was on or not. They told them that they should be able to. They told them if they closed their eyes, they should be able to see the laser. So there's a piece of this that's really interesting, which I've seen in my own work, which is people who know or trust that they can receive spiritual energy, receive spiritual knowing, receive spiritual healing, they do so far more than the people who are coming in skepticism. And I have no problem with the skeptics because I am one too. And I also have to have people to prove to me that otherwise I don't go with it, right? I think that's the scientist, that's the logician in me, that is the materialist in me, like that is the skeptic in me. Like I have very much respect for people who are like this, but I also see when you believe you can do something, you can. I see it also in my students all the time from ages 6 to 60. That when they believed they couldn't do something, they couldn't. And as soon as I could get them to believe they could, they could. Their skills didn't suddenly change. They couldn't suddenly read better, write better, use their computers better, anything, any of the things I've taught. No, but once they believed they could, they just did. So it's not even just a spiritual thing. It's not even just a seeing lasers through a light, tight, double steel walled shielded chamber thing. It is literally about what you will allow in all areas of life. So I've done this with myself too. You know, we've looked at the what's a good example? A great example is the ability to receive money in abundance. And I just believed the world was hard and you have to fight for your money and you just might die suddenly. You might not be able to afford food and like you have to struggle through all. It's just all who there's a scarce amount of resources and everyone's in competition for them. And I really examined that and I started changing that belief on purpose. And I started believing, no, not only is there so much abundance in the world, which is true, there is no such thing as a scarce resource, which is true. And that we're not actually in competition with each other, which is true. And that we can all have abundance at the same time, which is true. And finally, that I deserved abundance. It just started coming. I was doing nothing differently. In fact, I had to try less to get more just by switching that simple belief in my mind. And it's not that simple to change. I had to do mantras. I had to work on it every day. I had to like visualize it. I had to work on it. I had to notice the way I was talking about it to people and change my words around it. So it took a lot of presence and intention, but I did it and it directly paid off. Literally, pun intended. So these participants, they could see the laser because they were told they could and they believed they could, and so they could. So this study suggests the presence of non-local perturbation effects consistent with traditional concepts of intuition as a direct means of gaining knowledge. You know, people always talk about the observation effect in quantum mechanics, and that once you are trying to measure, is it a wave or is it a point, right? The photon, then it is that. There's all sorts of things that we realize that our consciousness has an effect on things, but a lot of these way deeper studies that show how we can apply that to a much more macro scale, they're really fascinating and they're widely ignored. Oh, I just realized this is by Dean Radin. Dean Radin is I'll just say I appreciate his science immensely. We also have this from Princeton, from Stanford, from some of the highest, most highly regarded palaces of education that exist in the world. We have all kinds of really deep studies and programs around consciousness and what we would call spiritual concepts. This is the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research page. They call it PAIR. Unfortunately, there's a lot of PAIR acronyms and a lot of PAIR projects or PAIR programs. So if you're searching for it, maybe just write it out, Princeton. So this is their first little description of themselves here. It says engineering and consciousness. The Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Program, which flourished for nearly 3 decades under the aegis of Princeton University School of Engineering and Applied Science, has completed its experimental agenda of studying the interaction of human consciousness with sensitive physical devices, systems, and processes, and developing complementary theoretical models to enable better understanding of the role of consciousness in the establishment of physical reality. This is from Princeton. It was running for nearly 3 decades. It's in the School of Engineering and Applied Science. Like, it doesn't get much more materialist, approved sorts of sources and ways of thinking about this than this. And still, it is a predominant ideology that anything spiritualistic or psychic or non-local or consciousness-based is hooey and should be cast out, and that makes you a better person to do so. She says, like, see how ingrained this is, especially in the West, especially here in our society in the West. So, they've kind of moved into other ways of doing this program, and it makes me wonder. I mean, who knows? How long was this going to be allowed to go on and kind of prove the non-locality of consciousness, the primacy of consciousness, and all of the things, therefore, we can affect about reality with our consciousness, especially when we use our will, our emotion, and our consciousness together in deep presence. So they have a ton of experiments you can read through. And they say here the practical, the intellectual, and the spiritual have been their 3 sort of overarching goals of this project in their search for knowledge. And they say, despite the small scale of the observed consciousness-related anomalies, they could be functionally devastating to many types of contemporary information processing systems, especially those relying on random reference signals. Aircraft cockpits, ICBM silos, surgical facilities, trauma response equipment, and they go on and on and on. And it's interesting to think too of the military applications of this. It's interesting to think of the reports of at least light balls, which I call the spiritual ancestors, if not aliens, interacting with nuclear silos, nuclear weaponry, and turning it off. It's interesting to imagine or wonder if that is actually the will of humanity acting out on something that was trying to subvert or go against the will of humanity. And this is also why I constantly talk about this. It's not because I desperately need people to believe me or to what. It's because I hope that more and more people understand there is no end of the world if everyone just doesn't go there. There is no collapse of economy if everyone just keeps believing that we can keep going forward. There is nothing that can happen against our will, but when we just let ourselves be swept away with it and we just fear it and we just dump our consciousness into it, then it can happen. And then whose fault is it? Well, it's yours. So stop it. Just stop it. So we could do 12 episodes or more just on the content of PAIR, but we'll move on. That's just the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research. Is what Princeton says about consciousness and its effect on reality, a direct ability to change reality with your consciousness. We also have this is also Princeton, my bad, I thought it was Stanford. Princeton, the Global Consciousness Project, meaningful correlations in random data. And this is, and they say this right on the front now. Coherent consciousness creates order in the world. Subtle interactions link us with each other and the earth. That's right on the front page. So there's all kinds of things. It'd be interesting to read all these reports. They have one on the coronavirus, George Floyd, BLM, Peace Day, all sorts of stuff. And this is also, by the way, why media is so dangerous. Not media like what I'm doing. It's not much danger in that, right? Anyone can tune in, tune out. I'm not using any magic to hypnotize you, but you go look at a mainstream mass-produced program. It's called a program for a reason. It's programming you. And they literally use trance-inducing visuals and ways of speaking in order to access your subconscious and use your consciousness against you. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is a fact. This is in the design itself. This is baked into it. Open secret. No one ever tried to hide it, really. They just didn't come out and talk about it all the time. So yeah, we're connected with everyone. We're connected with Earth. Our consciousness affects those things. It's pretty obvious if you're not stupid. I mean, I'm not saying everyone has access to this information or has encountered this yet. I'm saying the people who have encountered it and discounted it and dismissed it, they're stupid. And the people who have encountered it and wondered and thought about it, well, now we're getting somewhere, right? So they talk about quantum tunneling and all this stuff, number generators, synchronizing the feelings of millions of people. Um, I mean, they're literally measuring whether the random data that comes out becomes structured and more coherent when mass events happen, when the consciousness of the whole world is sort of stimulated together. And the answer is yes, every single time, yes. Often before the event happens, which also then shows you that there is a time aspect here. That it proves that time isn't linear and that our consciousness can move around in time, which is something that I also use in my work with people. We go to past lives, we do soul retrievals, we go back to previous points in this life. Anybody can do it. It's actually easier than you think. And that's something that now science, materialist science, has established. This is not the only way. I had an old article too that was just all of the evidence that linear time doesn't exist and that consciousness can travel through time. And this consciousness generating, global consciousness project is one of those pieces. This is what they've shown. They have some books. You can get those. I'm sure you could probably find them in some places for free as well. They're old. They're not brand new. They're not hot off the press. There are probably plenty of places. And so there's this Global Consciousness Project as well. We also have my oft talked about, often returned to. I don't know if you're a long time listener of the show, you've heard me talk about this. I'm serious, probably more than 100 times. This is Rupert Sheldrake's morphic resonance and morphic fields concept. And it's just a way to describe all the things we just talked about. It's just a way to describe how information organizes itself, how it is more accessible if it's more highly charged. It's more accessible than if it's highly repeated. It's more accessible if more people have thought about it and accessed it and used it. And that these fields of information are generated by our consciousness, but then accessible by our consciousness and do create reality and can travel through time. It's just a scientific framework to describe this information that exists everywhere all the time, is accessible to everyone everywhere all the time. It's hollow fractal in nature. And he's a genius in describing this. And he's a genius for all of the studies he pulls together to support this framework of looking at consciousness and information flow in a conscious universe. And you should ask yourself why him and Graham Hancock were the only two people, two scientists, to go viral in their TED Talks and then have those TED Talks taken down quite instantly. You should wonder why. You should wonder, what is it about them that's so dangerous then? Because there is no harm in leaving up an idea that is bunk. If it's bunk, then it's easy to prove that it's bunk. Logic will put it to bed eventually. Good argument will be used against it. Good information, good studies will be used against it. But you can't, because this actually holds so much water. There is no disproving it. And apparently that's terrifying for them. It should be. Because if just a small fraction of the planet really stepped into this knowing and really understood the power of their own consciousness to literally change reality, then everything that they plan would instantly stop. You cannot overcome the consciousness of another person, even with your shitty black magic. Not even then, especially not then. A conscious person can't be affected by that unless they let themselves be. What, their consciousness trumps yours? No. just the masses of people they have hypnotized. It doesn't even trump anyone else's. It just uses it to create reality. This this is the other thing. When you really understand this, you will automatically no longer give your energy to things like these mass worldwide events and these big, Super Bowls and um, Olympic opening games and these things. You won't give your energy to it because you'll recognize just how powerful your energy is, and you will only give it to the things you choose if you really understand what your consciousness is. So he talks about fields of the mind, fields of nature, the memory of nature, morphic fields in biology, and more. If you find his TED Talk, it's fascinating. It's a really good summary of all of the stuff that he works on in this. He has tons of podcasts with people who are also just as genius as he is. Those are fascinating to listen to. He's a really beautiful person. He will respond directly to people. He's a very, very cool scientist. And he only hasn't come on the show because he doesn't have time. He's very honest with me. Every time I ask him, he's like, nope, still don't have time. Like, word. Very kind man. And here's his summary of morphic fields and morphic resonance. It says the hypothesized properties of morphic fields at all levels of complexity can be summarized as follows. They're self-organizing wholes. They have both spatial and temporal aspect and organized spatio-temporal patterns of vibratory or rhythmic activity. They attract the systems under their influence towards characteristic forms and patterns of activity, whose coming into being they organize and whose integrity they maintain. The ends or goals toward which morphic fields attract the systems under their influence are called attractors. The pathways by which systems usually reach those attractors are called creodes. If this is starting, if it's like too much and you're like, I have no idea what's being talked about right now, it's what I already said, but he's just explaining it a little bit more formally. But I also, if you are someone who has studied magic, black or otherwise, you may start to be saying, wait, this sounds a lot like, oh golly, now I can't remember the name of the things. Golems is one of them, but that's like the actual being. I can hear people screaming it at me as they're listening to this, and they're like, "That's that thing," and I've said it myself like 20,000 times, and now I just it's gone. But anyways, it's a concept in magic. It's that you put a lot of energy, a lot of imagination, a lot of emotion into something, and it creates itself, and it exists now as its own thought pattern. It exists, and it will attract more energy to itself and grow and grow and grow until it can't. You could also think of many spiritual beings in this way. You can say, oh, why is there, for example, let's just say that the soul of a chicken. that's not a spirit animal guide that most people think about, but let's just say the spirit of a chicken, specific chicken. So my chicken Regan, for example, who died, she and I can interact still. She has her specific soul. That's Regan. That's the chicken Regan. We can interact. I can also interact and do in the work that I do with something like the soul of chickens. And it is the kind of oversoul of all chickens. It is the collective chicken consciousness. And there is that being as well. That's sort of one of the morphic resonance fields I'm talking about. I don't know that Rupert Sheldrake would want to go there because, he is an actual scientist to be taken seriously. And it's very, very, very obvious that what I'm talking about is what most of those elitist, egotistical, atheist, materialists will just instantly shit all over. But this is why you can have a sort of group consciousness or a morphic field for anything. He says they interrelate and coordinate their morphic units or holons that lie within them, which in turn are wholes organized by morphic fields. Morphic fields contain other morphic fields within them in a nested hierarchy and holarchy. So it's part of what I just described. We could also, speak with the soul of all birds, right? There's a morphic field within a morphic field. He says their structures of probability and their organizing activity is probabilistic. They contain a built-in memory given by self-resonance with morphic units' own past and by morphic resonance with all previous similar systems. This memory is cumulative. The more often particular patterns of activity are repeated, the more habitual they tend to become. This is part of how morphic resonance explains things like analogous structures, which I've also talked about before in previous episodes, especially the holofractal universe episode. In that, again, like we see the hand, let's say, that structure repeated in everything. We see it in birds, we see it across domains, we see it in whales. There's just this hand structure. It's an analogous structure. You'd say, well, why did the universe, in evolution, which has never been proven and doesn't have any evidence to support it, has said, well, that's because we all came from this one common cell. And morphic resonance has a much better argument with a lot more evidence to support it, that no, it's just once the structure exists, consciousness or the universe or whatever you want to call things that exist, they tend to use that same pattern because its morphic field is so strong. It worked, it continued, it created more of itself, and now there's a very strong morphic resonance that is easy to attach to. The same pattern I just described of something existing, working, continuing to exist, finding more of itself, all of those worked too, then that continues more and more. You can also apply that to what I commonly teach and have taught for years, which is that you doing anything makes that thing more accessible to everyone, everywhere. This is also proven. This is the 100th monkey effect. This is the reason why labs all across the world for decades will try to synthesize a certain chemical and can't do it. And then one lab finally does, and so do all the rest, even before they share how they did it. Why? Because of this. Because of morphic fields and morphic resonance, because the information exists in the field and everyone has access to it. Because once something, the way is created, then everyone else has an easier time finding the way. The mile, ran the mile. Nobody could beat the 4 minutes. Then beat the 4 minutes. Now everybody can do it. No, not literally everybody, but anyone who trains hard enough and tries hard enough can do it. Humans can do it. Things we thought were impossible. And it's by this exact mechanism. So when I say you heal yourself and you heal the world, I'm not just a woo-woo weirdo full of shit. I'm describing science to you. I'm describing reality to you. I'm telling you just the plain and simple factual truth. You heal yourself, you heal the world. It's so easy. Like, people are like, no, we have to fight and we have to die and we have to like spill blood and like sign documents and tear down governments. No, you don't. I mean, go for it if that's your soul's purpose. I don't think it is. I don't believe you. And it's way easier to heal yourself. It's actually pretty hard. Most people don't want to do it. It's pretty hard, but you can do it. And the more and more of us do it, the more easy it gets. And so morphic resonance and morphic fields explain so much, including magic. What actual magicians call magic. Not, don't care if you believe in it or not. Just saying that's a school of thought that exists, and science has a better explanation than the magical one. We also have this elitist, materialist explanation that near-death experiences are they're just chaos in the brain when you die. And then if you just happen not to die, then you kind of like make it coherent, and then you tell this story. Oh, I died and I went to heaven and I saw God and my dead grandma and my dog was there. Like, you just made that out of just a storm in your brain. That's their story, right? But actually, again, we have nothing but studies that absolutely prove otherwise, over and over and over and over again. A 2017 study by 2 researchers at the University of Virginia raised the question of whether the paradox of enhanced cognition occurring alongside compromised brain function during an NDE could be written off as a flight of imagination. And the answer is no. It can't be. People who experience near-death experience always explain it in the same ways. They say it was more real than reality. And in whatever way words they use to describe that, they all say that. I say that about my own experience that other people have classified as near death. And so I just do that now too, because it's easier for people to understand than what actually happened. Realer than real, more real than reality, easier to stay coherent, conscious, and focused than ever before. Things existing more clarity, information just appearing to me and being so understandable in an instant. Realer than real. And everyone explains the same thing. They say the same thing about their near-death experiences. And yet we're supposed to believe that when they have radical brain damage, they're dying from blunt trauma injury to their brain, that they experience something that coherent, that random chaos as your brain is freaking out and dying, that storm of electricity that's in your brain, that is experienced as realer than real. It doesn't even make sense. But these people are so desperate to not look at something that they can't explain that they just ignore it. It is the height of pride, ignorance, and ego. They also have plenty of studies. I don't know if this stupid article gets to it or not, but probably doesn't because it's Scientific American. They have hosts and hosts of studies of what people actually experience when they were out of body. They can report the conversations that the doctors had. And even if you think, well, they were still there in the room with them, technically their body's recording it. So that could be a memory that they then relate after coming back from death or whatever you want to call it. We also have ones where they floated out of the building and they said, oh, there's a yellow pair of shoes on the ledge on the 4th floor. And how could they know that? And then they go look and there is a pair of yellow shoes on the 4th floor. We have millions of those stories of things they couldn't have known otherwise that they now know because they left their body. Consciousness doesn't exist in your body. Consciousness comes through your body. It's so obvious at this point that I just wonder actually what's wrong with the people who have encountered this information. People who haven't encountered it, I get it. People who have, what's actually happening with you? Is it just fear? Is it just ego? Is it just that you don't want to be perceived a certain way? Because in this society, we've made it very clear that anyone who's not an atheist materialist is a woo-woo wackadoo that you should just dismiss and hate. Is that it? Is it just the pressure of the group? Grow some courage. Do better. This is also interesting. There's a recent study from 2023 or maybe 2022 where researchers identified a surge of gamma wave activity associated with consciousness in the dying brains of comatose patients. So no gamma activity for months, sometimes years, nothing. And then all of a sudden they're dying and a huge amount of gamma wave activity goes through in a neural hotspot associated with dreaming and altered states of consciousness. So wherever they take that helps me know, okay, yeah. So when I'm teaching dream walking and we're actually getting information that is real and actionable, that we can then go back up with data that we can then go prove is actually real data. When we're getting information that seems to be beyond human understanding or beyond human reach in the universe and the cosmos, that there actually is something to that. That when we're having altered states of consciousness and you're interacting with entities or you're out traveling through the cosmos because you took some DMT or whatever, that actually you are out there doing that. They're maybe not going to come to that conclusion. But I understand that from this study. And maybe you can too. Lots of studies about this. There's also yet another really easily looked at phenomenon of past life research. And this is best done in the way that Ian Stevenson and others did it. Since 1961, he studied thousands of cases of children reporting past life memories. And it's much, much better when it's children, right? Because they don't have the same, especially back then, pre-internet, everybody watches movies and TV all the time, like, right? Pre sort of access to the entire world of being. So they're not conditioned by that. They don't have those sorts of experiences. They're very young. Sometimes they're 3 years old, 2 years old, 4 years old. These young kids who don't have that access yet are talking about lives. They talk about the names that they had. They talk about how they were killed. They talk about where or what it looked like or the names of cities. And then they could go back and actually find that. And yes, some people are like, all those kids were coached. All of them? Maybe some of them were. Maybe some of them were the Munchausen by proxy sorts of people who just need attention. They're like, look, kid, you're going to say this and this and that could be. In a lot of cases, that was discounted also or proven to not be what happened or possible. And we just have more and more and more. This is old. This is old research. We have more and more and more evidence of this. We have entire religions built on this, where the person who will die will say, I'm going to be born next in this area in this year. Go look for me. And then they'll go look for the baby that was born in that area in that year or whatever. And they'll put them in a pile of things that person didn't have anything to do with. And they'll have one object they did. And they'll be like, pick up the thing. Or the kid will go pick up the things, only the things that were theirs in the previous life and nothing else. There are people who remember their past lives as though they happened this life. It's not even like me. I have the memories. I get dropped into them. I experience some of that. I understand that it's me. I understand that it's another life. Mostly I'm experiencing the trauma and horrifying trauma. And that's it. I don't have the whole life. I don't have all the skills. I don't have all of the abilities or the names of the people around me. Some people do, and they can go back and find those lives. There's some people who I've worked with who I've been able to tell them, oh, it was in this area. I can see your banner that you had. Here's the colors of it. There's this animal on it. It was about this time. And they can go find, because I usually don't have time, but they go find then, yeah, there was a banner that looked like that in that area at that time. I didn't know that consciously, right? But it came through. And so we have nothing but evidence that people have past lives. If people have past lives, then clearly consciousness is not relegated to just a thing that happens because your brain exists physically. It's not produced by the brain, as is famously said by someone who I can't remember who, but it's more like your brain is the transceiver and it tunes into the specific consciousness of you that is incarnating here and now in this body. So this is Ian Stevenson's research that this article I have up here is about. There's lots of other research too. This was just the handy one that I found. So oops. So all of that. This is the article that I just wrote yesterday. I have so little grasp on time and space. I was like, last week. I was like, no, this was yesterday. Okay. And these are just a handful of things that I've just had in my pocket, ready to do a show about. And I decided, you know what, I actually want to write about this one. And so it, like I said, inspired the show. This is on Substack, rogueways.substack.com. This is called The Science of Transcendence. It's the most recent piece. My first love in writing was nonfiction. My first love in writing is the long essay, the philosophical or the scientific, the exploration of these types of ideas. That was my first and longest love. And so I still write this way. At some point, the trilogy, the fictional trilogy, Sign Curve of Aeons, literally came to me as a download, which used to be a word I hated because everyone just says, oh, I got to download. Oh, I got to download. Oh, I got to download. But it's true. People get downloads, and I did too. And this trilogy literally just plopped into my head. It was like, oh, okay, well, here you go. And there's just 3 books. And I was like, whoa. And I just like scrambled to get out just the gist of each of the 3 books because it was already sort of like dissolving. Like it came in fully formed. And then it just sort of like, I don't know, man, leaked into my aura. I'm not really sure like what diffused into my greater morphic field, you might say. And then I sat down and I just started writing. I was not a fiction writer. I always thought I have no idea how people write fiction. I told my guides at the time, who I was becoming much more familiar with, although I'd had them my whole life and been aware of them my whole life. I said, okay, well, I don't really know how to do this, but I understand that this was given to me and that I'm supposed to do it. So I'm just going to sit down in front of this computer. And you're going to have to tell me what to do. Like, and I would sit down and just entire scenes would just appear in my mind. And I would just start describing what I saw. And I would just start describing what I understood. And I would just start describing what happened. And this whole trilogy has come out, and I couldn't have planned it this way. I don't have that within me to plan a trilogy that all fits together in one seamless, beautiful story. That's not a thing. I have never understood how people do it. And here it is, fully formed. It exists. So before fiction and after fiction, that's my only foray into fiction. The nonfiction is my love. So this is, again, a little bit of a return to a science-based philosophical exploration of nonfiction. And it's called The Science of Transcendence. And I'm literally talking about the type of transcendence that we talk about, like spiritual transcendence, where we become that which we actually are, which is consciousness. And we understand that the physical is secondary, consciousness is primary. That type of transcendence, that type of awakening. And I say the manufactured divide between spirituality and science has held humanity back long enough. It's time to smash it to pieces. And I talk about all the types of studies we just talked about. I didn't even touch on remote viewing and more. There's so much more. There's so much supposedly psychic or spiritual phenomenon we could touch on that studies have been done on. But I said the cult of scientism finally seems at death's door and ready to admit that what has long found itself relegated to the fringe is perhaps the unifying field and ultimate answer to all scientific inquiry and discipline, which is consciousness. And then I talk some smack about the atheists and the materialists. I don't have any problem if you're just agnostic, if you just say, I don't know for sure. Yeah, that actually you're just honest. But most people should call themselves agnostic because almost no one knows. You have gnosis of something, you've directly experienced it, then you know. There's very few of those people. So agnostic, cool. Atheist, you're going to tell me you truly believe there's no organizing principle in the universe that is intelligent and conscious. That which people have called God, described as God, and personified in the shape of like a being, but actually is just this intelligence. It's just intelligence. It's just information organizing itself. You could pretend it's a guy with a beard if you need to. You could pretend it's a slinky if you need to. It doesn't matter how you visualize it, or if you need to visualize it, you can do it however you want. You're going to tell me you believe. Your belief is that there's nothing, and this is all accidental and mechanistic. You're insane, actually. Something wrong with you. That takes a much bigger leap of faith than anything else I've said today. You're crazy. I used to be you. I used to be crazy too. I get it. I say the truly genius have always admitted that scientific philosophy and theology are two branches of one tree. And I mean that seriously. I mean, if you look back at Tesla, at Einstein, at the people we say are geniuses, all of them say this. If not throughout their life, at least by the end of it. All of them. There aren't any that don't get there. So I said we came to the same truths, we name them different things, we pretend we're doing different work, but there's only one reality, one thing, and we see more and more just how destructive it has been to pretend that quote-unquote science must equal mechanism or mechanistic thinking and infinite reductivism. I talk about this recent study where the human brain is shown to be fractal in physical architecture. So I've talked before at least, about how our thought patterning, our memory, recall, the energy as it is moving through, the electricity as it's moving through our brain, that is interdimensional. That is happening interdimensionally. That is shown. That fractal nature of that is shown. But this is physical architecture. The microtubules themselves are fractal in nature. And I say whether this is an outgrowth of the multidimensional fractal energetic pattern of the whole universe, or it's just designed to best harness that. It's a miraculous structure, the finesse of which no human could have imagined before we discovered it. People, this should make people cry tears of joy. How beautifully our structure reflects the macro, right? As within, so without. As above, so below. As the body, so the soul. Those statements aren't accidents. Our genius first existed in our mystics. We're just getting around to making it fit our materialist outlook. So here's a beautiful quote as well about these microtubule networks. It says, the brain is a fractal, massively parallel processor generating complex spatiotemporal electromagnetic field patterns that correlate with cognition and perception. You also may have remembered me talking about over and over and over again the power of decentralization and the parallel structuring of everything. And that if all else fails, the built-in fail-safe of nature is to destroy the overly centralized. So even if the psychopaths pull off a one-world government, it will be destroyed. People imagine this technocratic world where we can't escape our electronic prison and the simulation that we're forced into. That cannot actually exist in nature. It will destroy itself. Every single thing in nature, all of it, is parallel in nature. Parallel systems are the default. No centralization has ever gone on to exist. And if you want to go back to the morphogenetic field concept, it can't. It fails every time because nothing successful has actually used that model. And so you can't. That's the point of the morphogenetic field. It is what is successful. It is the natural outgrowth of the universal consciousness. This quote goes on to say, a key property of a fractal system is a scale-free complexity, which means that the degree of complexity of the system is invariant under scaling. That means no matter how big or how small, no matter how microscopic or macroscopic this gets, the complexity doesn't change. It is always as elegant and simple at every level. That is a parallel system. That means no matter how far up you go in consciousness or how far down you go in consciousness, it is just as complex. It is invariant. It can be shown that the degree of complexity within the human brain is approximately invariant from the tissue to the cellular to the molecular levels. That's fractal. That is what fractal means. It's ultimate parallelism. It's ultimate holographic information, accessible anywhere at any time by anything that is conscious, which is you. I also talk about Terence McKenna. I point out he's equally maligned and celebrated, but he is a genius either way. Deep into the entheogenic influence and study thereof. And he was trying to locate the mechanism by which humans could experience the transcendent and seem to bring information from afar, from other dimensions, or from beyond death, or from their own ancestral lineage and into the present. And I point out that this is what shamans, this is what psychonauts, this is what people have been doing in all sorts of spiritual traditions all throughout history, over and over again, provably, often. And he asked the question, how? What is the actual mechanism? And so he authored Invisible Landscapes. I've talked about it also a million times. I've written this précis of the entire book called The Shaman's Door. I link to it here in this article. You can go read a poetic summary of his entire book. of the entire piece, Invisible Landscapes. And in this, he talks about a tryptophan mechanism which activates and coherently produces massive electrochemical force in which literally our DNA itself could unzip, open for us to access all information throughout all of humanity, throughout all of history, and then rezip so that we can obtain data from this vast trove of information that literally exists in every single cell of our body. And as I read this, I understood that it had the ring of truth. Well, now, that was years ago. I don't even know when he wrote that book. I wrote this piece in 2014, 10 years ago. And I understood that this was true. And now researchers have found that tryptophan networks in the body do contain biological architecture that can become collectively coherent within the organism and become quantum optically enhanced and result in long-range resonance and synchronization. They're not going quite as far as saying, therefore, your DNA unzips and you can access all of your ancestral information or whatever, but they are describing the same mechanism and function otherwise. So modern science right now showing this. It entails a highly ordered core, microtubules, filament bundles that become ultra-fast information transference points. What else is that describing except the experience of epiphany, the experience of whole being, consciousness enhancing, awakening experience, or what some people refer to as Kundalini activation? That is what that means. So we're getting to this, literally the science of transcendence. Now we're literally starting to find the mechanisms by which this sort of happens. I'll tell you already, it still doesn't mean you're going to be able to just trigger it in people. It's only going to happen when your consciousness, the consciousness you're tuned into that I call Lindsay, that you call whatever you call yourself, that consciousness is only going to do what it's ready for. No one's going to be able to come up to you and just awaken unless you've done all the things that had to happen first in order to get there. Consciousness doesn't do things by accident. But understanding the mechanism by which your physical body seems to reflect to you what your consciousness is experiencing, that's some fascinating stuff. So I also channeled through sometime October 2023, this piece, Genetic Code Changed Forever, ? Because people were, talking about these injections and that the modified RNA or the messenger RNA or whichever types of RNA are in these are going in and causing your body to create new mutations in your genetic code that are then being repeated. And so humans are changed forever. And so the message that I channeled through said, no, it's not. It said there's actually no way for that to even happen. And they didn't use words like morphogenetic fields, and they didn't use words like quantum transference, lightning fast quantum transference, or tryptophan networks, but they described how nature has its memory and its code. And even if something were to come in and disrupt a body and this body's code, you could go back, you could change it back just with consciousness, or that nature will just correct it over time. And so that actually you can't ruin things forever by doing this type of manipulation, which is similar to what I was describing earlier, where even if centralized power came into existence, nature would have a way of doing that. And this was a similar sort of message. And I have learned over many decades to trust what comes through for me in these channeled messages and in these experiences I have. I have learned through my own deep skepticism and resistance just how much I can trust these things. I don't expect anyone else to. I don't really care who does or doesn't, but I find it fascinating that what they said is now reflected in scientific materialist halls of knowledge in these studies, where they found that specifically so far only octopus have been shown to do this, but it has been shown that octopus can alter its own DNA. It can return to old forms of DNA. It has a memory of DNA. Even if there are mutations, it can go back to its original DNA. If that exists one place in nature, it can exist anywhere else. The morphogenetic resonance means that anything can actually do this. We've just only found it in octopus. It's easiest for us to see it there because they can change so fast. If you've ever watched an octopus swim through the water and suddenly turn a completely different color, pattern, shape, texture in a moment, then you know what I'm talking about. And so again, another quote from the same author, actually, Dr. William Brown, who authored both of these studies, says, "At the fundamental most scale, the universe is a singular quantum field, and there is a continual flux of energy and information through this field. This flux of information, as it is coordinated through the multiply connected geometry of the entanglement network of space, animates the universe with qualities of an innate intelligence present in the self-organizational dynamics. In fact, a hyper-intelligence and natural sentience that is not the result of computation or clockwork." And we can read between the lines there and say, it's not mechanistic. It's not purely materialist. But due to the interrelationship, often non-local, between all subsystems of the universe, which synergistically self-organize in a hyper-intelligent, fully cooperative, and interconnected system. He's saying everything I just said in a very intelligent and very dense way, and this is the same truth. The memory exists, the morphogenetic field exists, the matter, the material that is created and expressed, it's secondary. There is a universal intelligence that organizes itself into systems, and those systems will always be parallel, fractal, holographic. It can't be changed and destroyed forever. So when the spiritual ancestors gave us the mantra, "My DNA is divine scripture, written by source, true for eternity, unstoppable," oh, how right they were. Feel free to continue using that if you like it. So I end all of this by saying, those who fight so hard to reduce a complex universe to a reductive series of mechanistic causes and effects without taking into account the undeniable presence of transdimensional consciousness manifesting in hollow fractal unity and totality will never understand themselves or this crushingly gorgeous existence. They are without imagination, which deprives them of a specific superpower of the manifested consciousness in which we walk. What an empty path. May it bring them back to themselves, the only true mystery they will ever encounter, so that they can remember who they are and why they came here. May we find the unified field within us and one another in order to leave behind the age of emptiness we have created. And that would be how we solve the false dilemma, the illogical division we've created between science and what we call spirituality. It's just a word. It doesn't actually mean anything. The reality is the reality, and the reality is both science and spirit together at once. It's all that's ever been there. We just choose to put it into different camps and then make them fight each other. And I'll tell you, most of the spiritual people, they're not fighting the scientists, actually. They're just doing their thing. It's usually the egotistical, atheistic, I'm better than you, I'm smarter than you people who are just so upset that anybody would dare to recognize their own soul, the primacy of their consciousness, the indestructibility of their consciousness, the non-locality of their consciousness, and the eternal presence all throughout the universe of that same consciousness, which I choose to call God. I choose to call it source. I could just as easily call it boot or tree. The words don't matter. It's how you understand it, how you understand yourself. And until you understand yourself as a divine creature of non-local consciousness that will exist forever in this hollow fractal wonderland, travel well, aim for balance, and always look inside first. Mwah.
electric chic. Now I lay me down to drown in the street. It's a funk time frame, overloaded migraine. For the souls that I've strained, apologies, I ice things. We're probably better off, isolated in a box. Don't contemplate the ticking clock, counting minutes rolling off. Nerve tonics, the dole, the boot stamping skulls. Flatten cats, cursing those spinning on a globe. Everyone loving screenshots over the optical. Spraying my lungs, catch Johnny in the hospital. This is an odd diddle, but ain't that my character? I should say the dated, let the opioids tear my nerves. Spare a word, comrade, I got a plethora. The flowers are still standing and I'm 10 clicks ahead of ya. Butter stutter spreading ya. Man, I need an editor. Ya homie, shut it and rest. I'm 12 steps from deadin' ya.
Now, 12 long hours before the sun will rise.
Why can't they stand the sunlight? Why are they only seen at night?